All right, let us get in to our big review of the week.
Here we go.
This is Tapestry. Let me give you some stats on Tapestry. Tapestry came out in 2019. It plays 1 to 5 players. You got me right. It plays solo as well, all the way up to 5 players. It has a current BGG weight of 2.8. The designer is Jamie Stegmaier. You might know Jamie from such games as Scythe and Viticulture and Charterstone and Euphoria. Artist is Andrew Bosley, who has done lots of lovely games, including Everdell, which we just spoke about, and Rom Brown, who is a newcomer to the board game world. He designed all the lovely clay-looking miniatures, and I believe the inspiration for the look of this game came from Jamie actually seeing his little tiny cool clay miniatures that he made and thinking, well, those would be wonderful in a board game. I wonder if he can find a way to turn that into plastic. Mm-hmm. The publisher is Stonemaier Games, who, of course, had Wingspan in the last year, a huge hit. Let's quickly talk a little bit about the history of Tapestry.
Sure.
Tapestry. So Jamie Stegmaier, who is the founder of Stonemaier Games, decided to not do Kickstarters a while ago. He decided it was not the model that he was interested in, and he didn't like the process, and instead he wanted to go direct to consumer. Okay, direct to consumer is kind of a modern type of business that a lot of people are employing these days, and a lot of people think it's the future of all consumerism is direct to customer.
Malls are closing all over the world.
Exactly. So especially for niche worlds, right? Hobbies,
Sure.
Artists, things like that. Why not cut out the middleman in the world where the internet, people just go directly to the source, buy it right from there, and the creator gets the lion's share of the money. So he has decided that is the main business model he wants, but he also understands the importance of FLGSs to the hobby. And to cut them out completely is to do a disservice to his future as well. And most people still realize that the bulk of their orders are not going to come from direct to consumer, that they're going to come from online shops and friendly local game shops. And actually seeing it in front of you and being able to pick it up or see people play it on the table and then walk over and ask what it is still the most important route to success in board game publishing.
To large, more mainstream adoption.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he's trying to sort of do a little bit of both. He has now done a pre-order system wherein, for example, he did a print run of 25,000 in Tapestry, which in the board game world is massive. That's Fantasy Flight Games level publishing, right? I mean,
Sure.
We're talking the average board game print run is 5 to 10,000, 10 being a huge amount.
Yeah, I think Queen Games at Essen,
Right.
does huge runs, and I don't think they even do 25,000 on some of their games.
Yeah.
I do think the order of magnitude, though, is going to get some savings. It's going to be pretty intense. So
Yeah.
maybe maybe it's the kind of way to make a game with this much plastic possible.
So he did.
Good point.
He did a fixed pre-order of 10,000 copies, direct to consumer from his website.
Sure.
And 15,000 are going to FLGSs. Okay, that's the first print run, and he labeled each one. I think number 10,588. 568, which is a nice little touch, just a fun little thing to number them all.
Sure.
So the first 10,000 going straight to consumer from his website. He promised that it would be available for pre-order for 4 days. It sold out in 36 hours. People were upset. They felt like, well, I didn't know it was limited. I just thought I had 4 days. I wanted to spend a few more days and think about it. So people got a little bit burned on that. And we had a little bit of a similar thing happen with Wingspan. Wingspan, these are two games that I think got bigger than he expected. I think the ability for things to go viral in the board game community has skyrocketed in the last year beyond what people think is possible. I think with Reddit and with Twitter and things like that, it's now getting to an audience faster and wider than ever expected.
I think also the hobby is broadening and maturing. I think that
absolutely
there is some success that has happened lately where we have gotten more and more people into gateway games. And as Alfred talked about earlier, that was one of the things about Wingspan. It really brought a whole bunch of new people into the hobby. And once you get in the hobby, listen, people are going to find their equilibrium. Some people are going to sit in that light to medium weight space for a while. Some people are going to start to experiment in the deep end. And Tapestry is not a particularly heavy game, so
and also not a particularly light game, which is I think why he thought to a certain extent that it might not do as well as Wingspan. It's also more expensive. It's a little heavier.
It's 25,000 though. So
Right.
I think there was some suspicion that it would do very well.
True. But I think Wingspan did that and also sold out instantly. But so I think it still did better than he expected it to do. There are still 15,000 coming to your FLGS. I think I said last week that if you want a copy, you need to call your FLGS probably last week and let them know that you want to reserve one.
But we should have a moment of silence for Stonemaier Games, for all of the thousands and thousands of people who want to buy the game and can't yet buy the game. It's just
What a horrible predicament to find themselves in.
horrible problem.
So let's talk about what is Tapestry. Tapestry, the theme of it is a civilization game. That is the theme of the game. It's a civilization game, whether or not you agree that it is technically a civilization game. People have very strong opinions on what makes a civilization game, but everybody seems to agree that the game Civilization is probably what they think of when they think of a civilization game. Sid Meier's video game, or even the board game iteration of it. It's hard to be pressed to disagree with that.
Francis Tresham designed the board game Civilization.
Correct.
And that predates Sid Meier's, and that predates all of that sort of stuff, and it has no relation to it, actually, except that Sid Meier took a lot of ideas from...
And Jennifer Schlickburn, who we talked about earlier, was one of the designers on Advanced Civilization.
Yes, she was.
So Tapestry is a civilization game, but it is, I think, technically, to me at least, a tableau builder. It is a game where you are building a collection of differentiating abilities that hopefully stack onto each other, and the way that you build your income creates some sort of an engine that makes you be able to do something better than other people, which to me would be the definition of an engine builder.
Yeah, I don't know about Tableau Builder. When I think of Tableau Builder, I'm thinking of a layout of cards that...
Yeah, well, it technically is that. But I think, okay, I'll say it's an engine builder more than it. It's a Tableau Builder in that you're actually
100%.
building a tableau of your resources. But yes, it is an engine builder.
I would offer that even though the tableau building is there, you are literally building a tableau. I think the randomness, which we will talk about, I'm sure, makes it so that it's a little less of a tableau build and more of an... There's some other prospect going on because you only can shoot for the stars so much. There's probably a sweet spot that can happen, but then probably a lot of times when you're not quite there. That's the game.
Let me quickly read you the lore behind the game. Create the civilization with the most storied history, starting at the beginning of humankind and reaching into the future. The paths you choose will vary greatly from real-world events or people. Your civilization is unique. In Tapestry, you start from nothing and advance on any of the 4 advancement tracks: science, technology, exploration, and military, to earn progressively better benefits. You can focus on a specific track or take a more balanced approach. You will also improve your income, build your capital city, leverage your asymmetric abilities, earn victory points, and gain Tapestry cards that will tell the story of your civilization. So a quick thing to point out in terms of a civilization game: this is not Earth, and this is not human civilization. This is, or at least not our Earth Terran civilization. This is an alternate Earth, an alternate history. The map is different every time you build it yourself. It's not, it's not the Earth map. These are not Earth civilizations. They are. This is we're ahistorical here.
They progress remarkably like Earth civilization did.
But
yes.
You could also learn AI singularity before you've learned how to make a nail.
Sure. Yeah. Abstracted. Let's say it's abstracted, right?
Exactly.
A little bit.
Jamie has said on his website, and I want to know how you feel about this: if you enjoy A Feast for Odin, Mombasa, and Russian railroads, we think you will enjoy creating your own civilization in Tapestry. Now, we have all played all of those games many times.
Sure.
How do you think do you think that is a fair comparison?
I think that very much so, that all of those elements are in there.
Well, let's talk about how. So how is it like Feast for Odin?
You have, next to your player mat, you have a individual city space. Mm-hmm. That city space has a grid, and there are some dots, which are basically spaces that are already filled in. All of the other spaces you are going to be able to fill in by pulling pieces off of your own board, houses, huts, trading posts, and that sort of stuff, off of your own board and placing them on this map. When you do that, you are unlocking things on your main board. By pulling off the house, you are unlocking one more point of population income, essentially, in the game, things like that. And by placing it on that mat, there are 9 by 9 grid, and every time you fill a 3 by 3 grid, you are essentially getting 1 extra resource for that. Right. And whenever you fill an entire row or column, 9 across, and every space is filled, you are, during an income phase, which is going to happen 5 times in the game, you are going to get points. You're going to get victory points based on how many of those rows or columns you have filled up.
The next two comparisons are very similar in that the reasons he's compared them are for the same reasons. That is Mombasa and Russian Railroads. Both of those games have in common that there are 4 asymmetric tracks, and you are building your strategy around which tracks you are moving up on. And obviously, Tapestry took that as well. There are 4 tracks in this game, and your entire strategy is based on how far you are moving up on how many of those tracks.
And Alfred, you should talk about this because you hadn't even read this, and your first comment was that you felt it had a lot to do with Russian railroads.
It just seemed like the most comparable to me. Absolutely, the most kind of focusable analogy I could find in my game space, and obviously there's a lot of other things going on, but in terms of the achievement track, in terms of the kind of cleanliness that it's going for, Russian Railroads to me is a phenomenal game that we played a lot when I first got into the hobby.
Sure.
That was something that was on your mind a lot, Matt. Mm-hmm. And so that was what we played, and it really, there was like a synergy to that.
I still love that game. I'm not totally sure why we stopped playing it. I think it's worth getting back into.
We just had new games that came along.
I think it's a great game.
Thinking about different mechanisms.
I think it's one of those games that we would love to bring out like 3 or 4 times a year and just revisit.
I do think it's a little bit of it's a little bit of a brain burner to introduce. I saw a lot of people struggle the first time they play. It's like the first, second time you play, doesn't necessarily grok. It's hard to, but then when you really are playing with people that are experienced and seeing kind of good choices and how to like really end game, how to make it work for you. But that being said, there were some significant differences between that space and what's going on in Tapestry.
Sure. Mm-hmm. The reason that it's like Russian Railroads is that the main actions of the game that you're going to take are moving your piece up 4 different tracks. You have a technology track, a science track, an exploration track, and a military track.
Right.
Those are the 4 tracks. Everybody starts off with one of their pieces down at the 0 space.
Right.
You spend your civilization's resources
which
to
are
move
population, currency, culture, and food.
Correct. You spend them to move up a space, and the farther you go up each individual track, the more of those resources you're going to need to spend to move up.
Right.
But also, consequently, the greater the bonus you get for going to that action space, including these tracks are divided into sections of 3. When you leave one section of 3 and enter the next section of 3, the powers increase considerably. And oftentimes you get one of these huge miniatures, which you get to place on that Feast for Odin board that you have.
I will say, though, that unlike Russian Railroads and some of the other games that are mentioned, the track kind of transforms in its usage. Like you are almost playing a different game at the advanced level of a track. It like sometimes jumps to being completely different scoring. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it starts rewarding other track
Exactly.
Like,
so obviously, like exploration and military are very tied together because they feed into each other and they reward each other. And we'll talk about whether or not there's worth doing anything other than that. But so let me just ask you guys: do you think, if you enjoy those games, you would enjoy Tapestry? If you enjoy Feast for Odin, Mombasa, and Russian Railroads, would you enjoy Tapestry?
I have to say, not necessarily.
I agree.
It is one of those things where he is absolutely apt that he has drawn a lot from these 3 influences and put them together.
Yeah.
The question is does that make good gumbo?
Well, and it's funny because I actually think that he's correct to compare the game to those 3 things, but I don't necessarily think they share an audience.
Correct.
Which is interesting. I don't necessarily think, I think if you love those 3 games, I don't know if you'll like this game.
I think this is where the comparisons are useful in terms of just looking at the game, but I think it's a different game, and I think it should be expressed and explored that way. Like I think that you would enjoy this game, but for other reasons,
right?
Than just simple like, oh, this is an expansion for Russian Road. It's not. It's a different game, and I think it's very enjoyable for.
Quick caveat: we are heavy board gamers. That we are defined as heavy board gamers. That our favorite games are very heavy games. So just off the bat, and the games I just listed are pretty medium to heavy games. I mean, those are definitely on the heavy side of medium weight games. Those 3 games. Russian Railroads, I would say, is almost a heavy game.
Before we get into the analysis, should we just talk about a couple more aspects of the game?
Yeah, sure. So
real quick. So we've described the board. We've described that you have houses on your board, and you are getting actions where you can pull those houses off and put them on your city map. And by completing your city map, you're unlocking opportunities for points and opportunities for more actions, essentially. We've described that your main action each turn is moving up one of those four tracks around the edges of the board. The other thing is that the center of the board is that map. And everybody starts with a stronghold, essentially, in one section of the map. And using exploration, you'll be gaining tiles and eventually playing tiles on the board. And by using military actions, you'll be spreading your influence by moving your pieces to conquer, take over more territories.
There's a Gaia project thing going on.
Yeah, I think very much so. There's a Gaia project thing. The other aspect of the game that we haven't really talked about, or the two other aspects, are the tech cards and the tapestry cards. Tech cards is very simple. When you move up the tech track, you're essentially getting technology cards, and there are always 3 that are available to you. Cool little interesting thing about that is, in many games, when you get a tech card, you have that ability. In this one, you get the card, and it goes on your X space. X space means this is a technology that we are developing, but we do not have access to yet. When you get to promote a technology, when you get to upgrade a technology, you move it to the circle space. Each one of these cards has a bonus in the circle and a bonus in a square. The bonus in the circle tends to be medium, and the bonus in the square tends to be high. And basically what you're doing is throughout the game, you are upgrading these technologies, and you're deciding when and which of the many cards that you may have there are going to be triggered, which bonuses you're going to get.
I think I'm going to give you that little bit of rules lawyering that you've been missing. Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, I hear him. Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Oh, never mind.
Now let's do this.
And you're good. I hit the button.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of rules lawyering. I think they call it inventing in this game.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, sir. You will never have friends.
Okay, you're live.
Cool.
That was weird. So now let's talk about, I think, to me, the most exciting part of the game.
Sure.
Which is how you become asymmetrical.
Correct.
So there are 16 civilizations in the game, each one differing levels of rule breakingness. Some at first blush sound wildly powerful. Some just sound like cool little bonuses you get every round. But these are the main thing. At the beginning of the game, you get 2 of these, you pick one. And that, to me, is a huge amount of the exploration and excitement of this game is civilizations. And I think no matter my review on this game, I will always be interested to see an expansion of new powers, because to me, that's the most fun part of the game.
Absolutely.
Is exploring the new powers. And with our 16, I have played with 4 of them now. So, I still have a lot of exploration to do in this game. And to me, it's the fun combination to see the different ones that come out of the table. And then you've got tapestry cards. So you'll only play 3 of these in a game, maybe some more, but 90% of the time, unless you have a big rule-breaking power, you're going to be playing 3. And these also are giant rule-breaking powers that either last for a whole era or are just one-time things. Now, it's the combination of the tapestry cards you get in conjunction with your civilization power that I think becomes exciting and interesting, and does a couple things. A, strategically, it gives you one of my favorite things in board games, which is make lemonade out of lemons. I love being handed a bunch of crap that doesn't feel like it belongs together and figuring out how to get the most victory points out of it I possibly can. I love that experience. Now, that experience has to be balanced in order for it to be competitive. Otherwise, it is just an optimization puzzle. And your optimization puzzle might have a very lower ceiling of points than your opponent's optimization puzzle. Mm-hmm. Now, your optimization puzzle could, if you play it perfectly, be worth 400 points. Mine, if played perfectly, could be worth 200 points. And I think that's totally something that can happen in this game. So instantly, if you want a highly balanced game, I don't think Tapestry is going to scratch that itch for you. But if you enjoy a optimization puzzle wherein you may lose, even if you play the best you can, but you still get a huge amount of enjoyment out of making your optimization puzzle as good as it can be. In essence, you're playing a slightly solitaire game with friends and doing something enjoyable. If you are excited by that, I think you will like Tapestry. If you love, I think, and this is something we haven't done at all, I think you could LARP the hell out of this game. I think you could have a very silly, fun experience of really LARPing your civilization. And
every time you turn one of those tapestry cards over, it could be
it's a
whole
huge
different
story, right? And I mean, so I pull out one of the player mats. Those are the large player mats underneath. One of my favorite things that I never even really look at because we're just we're cube pushers here. We're heavy gamers. But like each time you put a building on the table, you learn a different technology. So when I put a building house out, I've now learned currency, and then banking, then credit cards, and e-commerce, and all the way up to biometrics. If you're learning the culture track, you start with ceremony, and you get all the way up to virtual reality. You could have learned that before you learned the tech card for nails. Like there's just funny LARPing stuff in there. I think people who really like themes and the civilization. I think the civilization theme is will give out what you put in. I think it is a veneer, and I think it is not a 4X at all. Which is most people. It's hard to feel like a game is a civilization game if it's not a 4X. It's not a 4X in any shape or form. But I think the theme of it comes through if you want to make it come through. I think there's a lot of silliness in, I saw somebody posted this funny thing about if you looked at their board, it was this amazing story. The first thing they played was diplomacy. And then the second thing they played was world peace. And then the third thing they played was pirate and pillage. And it was like, what happens? Like they tried everything and it was this giant trap. And in the end, they just murdered everybody. And there's just a funny story there.
A comment on our current times.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, listen, there are a lot of good things in this game. All right. First thing, there's a lot of variety. Okay. You can focus on building up your city. You can focus on conquering parts of the map. You can focus on the tapestry cards. You can focus on your technologies and building them. You can focus on moving up different tracks and trying to get to those pinnacles, the ends of those tracks, which are amazing. You can focus on freeing up your buildings so that you're increasing your in-game economy. That's great, right? There's certainly no lack of things to do in the game, and that's pretty amazing. Second, it ramps up beautifully. You're only going to have 4 turns in the game, and at the end or the 4 rounds in the game, I should say. At the end of your first round, you can feel like, how on earth am I going to have more than 30 points in this game? Because your entire first round, 1/4 of your entire game, I've done almost nothing.
I mean, look at Paul. Sorry. Throw Paul under the bus.
Paul, who actually did nothing in the last game.
That's not true.
He was exploring the space.
He had a bad score. But look, no, the real deal is that you feel like, oh my God, how am I ever going to get? Why are there cubes for 100, 200, and 300 points in this game? And it's because those first actions, even though you didn't go anywhere, have built the foundation by which you are going to find synergies to score a lot. That's another point, is that it has awesome synergies. There will be some turns later in the game where you will take this action, which will allow you to take off this building, which will allow to place this building in your city, which will allow you to score points and get another action out of that, which will allow you to do, and so on and so forth. There are some awesome mega turns where you can get 20, 30, 40 points by a chain of actions that are triggered by a single action. And that's awesome to behold and really fun. And I'll also say that it has a variable pace that I've never seen in another game.
Yep.
You could be done with your game, as you did last time.
I was done 40 minutes before the last player. I had 40 minutes to just hang out and watch.
And you were like, I have 210 points. Beat it.
Yeah. I raced to a score, and then I said, beat it. And everybody but one player beat it.
I will say, too, you got to your third age when I was still in my first age.
Right.
And that I've never seen a game that quite does that.
Yeah, so there is no set rounds. So you just play, and you take income when you want. And when you've done your 5th income, you're done. And that's your final score.
And listen, Jamie, I think you've done an amazing job, because I've never seen that before. And that is a very, very interesting idea. And it works. It works very, very well here.
Is it player elimination?
No, it's not player elimination. The difference between that and player elimination is you
cannot win.
You have lost the game.
Right. You
have
could
lost
still
the game.
win. Well, I'd like to see a strategy where somebody finishes first and wins.
Well, I will say, isn't there some
definitely
powers
can
where the question is, when you finish, can you still be affected by some of the group effects?
The only thing you can be affected by is positive things where you gain VP. So any power you have that can still gain you VP
so you're not
works. But you cannot play trap cards. You cannot wait for someone to, if you're done with the game, if somebody wants to conquer your land, they've conquered it.
I think that there are only a few mechanisms in the game.
And that actually was the thing Jamie had to clarify and he had to actually make a decision on because it wasn't clear in the rules. And so he said, give me a few days to really think about this and give you a strong answer. And he came back, he said, you cannot play trap cards after you've finished.
Okay. Listen, I think there are a very few areas in the game that reward racing first, right?
Right.
The first person to play a Tapestry card in each age gets a resource bonus. And resources in this game are actions. So that's great. But I do think that the people that are finishing last generally are finishing last because they're taking more actions. If you're taking more actions, you're having more turns, and theoretically, you're potentially in set for higher.
To your point, though, you were often. I noticed last game you were very much to some of the milestones first on some of the tracks.
Yes,
which was a certain kind of rushing mechanism. And you were getting the very critical buildings to kind of complete some of your strategy, and you scored a lot of points in the end out of that. So you really were working it, and not that you were necessarily going out first, but you were very much using that synergy to make that sing.
Yeah, I think Matt in this last game we played Russian Railroads, and I played Feast Roden.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I raced up a track, and you filled up your board.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was very different than the previous game I played, where I played a very map-heavy game. I played a game that was very heavy on the map.
But Matt, did you ever actually ding any of the tracks?
No, I didn't. Yeah. But I got up to the last era in 2 of them.
Yeah.
So but no, I did not have a high resource. I just had a high output and a low actions. I really wanted to see how far I could push it with just trying to get as many possible points as I could as quickly as possible. And I think in hindsight, I needed to balance it a little more with getting more actions. I think if I had 30% more resources, I could have made more points, a lot more.
So now let's get to the issues that I have with the game. Because everything I just said, I totally 100% believe and are definitely huge positives about the game and actually make the game very, very unique. There are things about this game that no other game does.
It's a super interesting game. If you love board games and this is your hobby and you're obsessed with board games, it's worth looking at this game. You're going to want it. This is very unusual and interesting, not only in the way he put it out, but the way the components look. And there's just a lot going on here. This is a huge release. This is a blockbuster in our world, regardless of your end feelings on it. And it's something that you have to know about.
So my first negative is the theme. I have to say, at the end of the day, I'm not feeling like I'm playing a Civilization game when I'm playing this. I'm just not. Part of the reason is that the places where my civilization is doing something are these tracks that are over there on the board. They're not in front of me. They're on the board. Yeah. Like I moved up to the 9th space on the military track last game, and I had been sitting there for about a half an hour before I noticed, oh, look, I just got atomic weapons. It didn't feel like I got atomic weapons unless you're leaning over and reading exactly what that is. It doesn't feel immediate. There's nothing when you look at the game board, there's nothing telling you right away that, oh, I feel like my civilization is growing and getting more powerful. It's all reading the text of these little spaces that are sometimes very far from me to do that. So it doesn't really feel that way. Also, what you were saying, which you sort of portrayed as a positive, to me is a little bit of a negative in that 2 games ago, I got air conditioning before I'd invented archery.
Right.
And just in terms of a civilization game that doesn't feel, it feels wonky to me. It doesn't feel holistic.
So let me talk about my feelings on the theme as well. So to me, it does feel like a Civilization game, but it doesn't play like a Civilization game. I don't get the feeling of I'm playing a Civilization game, but I think the theme to me, when I look at it, when I look at my Tapestry, when I look at all the things, I feel I'm in a Civilization game world, but there's nothing about the mechanics that make me feel like I'm playing a Civilization game. Sure. And I also think that it will give back as much as you put in terms of, I think you got to LARP it a little bit and get silly if you want. Other than, sure. I think it is, as much as all of the Euros we play are trading in the Mediterranean games, and that is a silly veneer. I think this is a veneer of a theme. And I think it's as much as you want to get into it, it's there. But I don't necessarily feel like any of the actions I'm doing, or this is not a simulation. Right. This is not a Lacerda game where I feel like I'm running a gallery or a car manufacturing company. This is a Euro game where The theme is fun and it's there, but it's not. I don't feel like I'm playing a Civilization game.
And can I just jump in with my positive outcome? I really liked this game. I like a sense of discovery. I like a sense of mystery. I don't always go for the win in my preference. I really like something to unfold. So to me, this is the best version of Catan. Not to throw bolts, but there's enough randomness in this game that you're not essentially playing like in Catan. You're not really building a civilization. You are kind of making a map and making a mystery. And there is some player interaction this game lacks, but to me, that's what this game is doing really well. It's a great intro to a medium weight game that has a lot that I think the casual gamer can really enjoy, but enough randomness that maybe anyone can feel it's possible.
Yeah.
Alfred Darlington, ladies and gentlemen, this is Catan. Tapestry is Catan. Wow. Wow.
Well, okay,
throwing fireballs.
Let me speak to that as well, because here's how I feel. To me, there's a couple things we can do here. The first one is, do you enjoy an optimization puzzle that is not stressful, that is fun to try to figure out, that if you really put your mind to it, you can figure out how to get a ton of points. It may still be less than somebody else at the table, but if you enjoy that optimization puzzle, if you enjoy, okay, here's what I've got, here's my options, I really want to figure out how to do the best I can with those things, and I don't really care who wins. I really just care that I do that. At the end, I feel like, wow, I really made that work. I really kicked butt at that. And like I got some stuff, and I got a lot more points than I thought, and I'm pretty proud of how I did that.
And it did some twists and turns, some unique things that were kind of funny.
And I explored the game. If that is enjoyable to you, and at the same time you love sitting around the table with your friends and talking and drinking beers or whatever, and having some snacks and having a fun time while you do that, I think you will absolutely love that. And that is an experience that I actually love.
Okay.
This is not a competitive game as it is out of the box. Now, I do not think that the best player will always win. I think you can have a combination of powers and Tapestry cards that are impossible to win at the table with and are impossible to lose at the table with, really. I think all this game needs to be competitive is for somebody smarter than me to look at the cards and look at the things. I think there is 8 civilizations and a deck of cards that are competitive. I think that you could play, I think maybe there's 6 to 8 in there that in a combination of every time you play is balanced. And I think someone needs to figure out, here's the competitive build. Take these 9 cards out and these 5 civilizations out and you're good. Here is the crazy wacky build. Take these 3 out and now everybody can do really bizarre stuff. Take these cards out. I think here's the casual one. Mm-hmm. First time gamers, people who don't play Euro games. These are the ones you play with. These are the cards you play with. I think somebody will figure that out. And I think there are 3 or 4 different versions of the game that are really interesting and feel different.
I understand that, and I agree with that. I think it's just a shame that wasn't done before the game is released. And by the way, that's an issue that I have with Jamie in the past. Viticulture has a similar thing. The summer and winter visitor cards need to be culled to play that game well and competitively. You can play a game with only those cards and win.
And Wingspan is a handful of cards that are wildly imbalanced with the other ones that do not have the same value in terms of other ones. So at a certain point, it's not him, it's us. Clearly, he has a design that he is looking for. And I think his designs always take into consideration casual gamers and people who want to feel like they can win no matter if it's their first game or their 100th. I think that's something he wants in games he puts out.
Isn't that part of the point, though, when we were talking about eliminating some of the civs, some of the factions, that the input randomness is part of it, right? That you're supposed to kind of have a wild swing, and then maybe people are playing against what's in front of what they're against rather than what's just on their board.
I don't actually think, and I could be wrong. Now I want to get a little specific on some of these, but I don't actually think that Jamie believes that the Futurists and the Merrymakers both have the same chance of winning. I don't actually believe he can think that.
Yeah, I don't know what Jamie thinks.
Neither do I. I'm looking at them
in the game, you get 2 of these differentiation powers, and you have to choose between them. And then you get your first Tapestry card.
Right.
And people have said on the forums,
take your Tapestry
Jamie,
card first.
You should take the Tapestry card first because that's a way you can figure out which of these 2 to choose because you can create synergy that way.
That to me is clear that he is saying this is not a balanced competitive game. This is a make lemons out of lemonade game. Or make lemonade out of lemons.
The problem is...
Because why wouldn't... There's no reason to do that unless it's just... Well, the main reason you do that is, well, because that's confusing for new players. That's more that is a barrier to entry for new players. Now that, well, I don't know this game. What do you mean I have to pick it before I see that? I'm looking at that. We've now made all new players who sit down. They now their eyes are glazing over because that's one other level of decision they have to make before they actually get to start pushing things around.
I disagree 100%, because for a new player, they look at the Tapestry card, they put it down, they look at their 2 powers, and they choose one. They're not making any different choice than they made previously.
I think it's one extra. I think you're having a hard time putting yourself into the shoes of people who have never played a Euro before.
Look, when these games are designed, they're designed toward strategy, or toward tactics, toward randomness, right? That's pretty much the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. The problem with these games is that Jamie seems to design, at least in this and viticulture, he designs games that appear to be strategic. Mm-hmm. They appear to be games where, in viticulture, for instance, I'm looking at the first few vines that I grew, and I'm like, oh, wow, I have a way to make champagne in this game, and I can probably make champagne before everybody else. I can go with a heavy champagne strategy. Yeah. The problem being that the entire rest of the game has all of these super random elements that will make my decision to go for that strategy based on my starting position almost irrelevant. In this game, it's a very similar situation. I have this starting power, which urges me to go heavier in this strategy or heavier on this line and to do this and to do that. But the randomness and the imbalance of the game makes that decision almost irrelevant. And if you're doing that, or largely irrelevant, right? Mm-hmm. If you're doing that, then you're sabotaging your own design, right? Listen, Quetzalcoatl has a lot of randomness, but it knows what it is. This is a game that is, it's trying to put two feet in 2 radically different pools, and I think it fails because of it.
Let me put your theory to the test here. So there are 2 things. So I think, right off the bat, your first concepts of randomness in this game are based on your Tapestry cards and your civilization, right? That's the largest part of the randomness in this game, you think?
No, I'll also say that there are 3 permanent scoring things that you get points based on in the game. Achievements, exactly. One of them is racing to the center space, which, by the way, the first player has an unalloyed advantage to getting toward. If they focus on that, it's almost impossible for them not to get to that center space before everybody else. And yet there is nothing in the game that gives any points to anybody going second, third, or fourth to make up for that difference. So that's one. Mm-hmm. Second thing is you get points for having defeated other armies on the field of battle, as it were.
Toppling 2 different opponents, there's an achievement for that.
Correct. There is nothing strategic about doing that, because the only way that stops is you go to where somebody else is, and you will defeat them unless they have a trap card, which is
a Tapestry card,
13% chance.
Right, there's 9 out of 50,
something around there. There is nothing I can do in attacking you to make that more likely to happen. There is nothing you can do as the defender to defend. It is simply, what card do I happen to have sitting down in front of me?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a few things you can do. You can go towards a player who has less Tapestry cards. They have a less chance of it, not a 0 chance, but less of a chance. You can go towards someone who has no Tapestry cards in their hand at that moment, which is rare but happens. But here's the real question though: what are you losing by getting a trap card played on you? What is actually the downside? And that's sort of what I want to talk about in terms of all these things. How many points are you actually losing or getting because of your Tapestry cards or because of your starting power? And how many points are you actually losing or getting? Because this is a game where your final score will range between 100 and 300 points usually. That's a pretty huge swing. So if you're telling me one action is 4 or 5 points, I don't think that's deciding the game. And I think one topple card, one trap card played on you on a topple, is at most costing you 4 or 5 points in the whole game. You still get to roll the dice. You're still getting the main bonus you get off of a conquer, which is either 7 points at best or another resource, which could be another turn. You're losing potentially a chance at that achievement. You still have a chance at it, but it's maybe 10 points most. And by controlling a place, you get 1 or 2 points every round, depending on how far you've gotten on that track.
I want to dispute your math. So if I try to topple Alfred like I did, who had 1 card, he had 1 Tapestry card.
Yep.
I'd go to topple him. He flips over a trap card. Boom.
Okay.
I've lost. He's won. By the way, that was my action for that round.
You still got to roll the 2 dice.
I got to roll the 2 dice, but he got the other benefit from that.
Well,
right?
he just retained he gave up a 10-point Tapestry card, which trap cards are also worth 10 points.
No, but he gained 1 out of the 2 victory conditions he needs for 15 points. Mm-hmm. And he retains control of that space, which is a point every time that particular thing is scored.
Not off the bat, you still have to move up that. He still has to go up that track to score it.
Sure,
you don't.
Most people end up at that track to some degree, and there's also
so at most that's 4 points in the whole game to him if he's only gone up the track to the first one.
Not really, because what it actually is it's a 30-point swing potentially, because he is 50. Because he didn't even have to take an action to be 50% of the way toward the 15-point bonus.
For to get rid of a Tapestry card, and it could be his only one.
No. What I'm saying is a 15-point bonus for getting the toppling two different.
It's only 10, I think.
Factions. 15.
Is it?
Getting to the center is 10.
Okay.
15 points is the bonus. And by the way, it's not just 15 points, but it's also denying me 15 points.
Well,
if he's my main competitor, that's a 30-point swing right there.
I think you're seeing it, though, that they're trying to diminish the role of direct conflict on the board. It's very much like a Civ game in that way where, it's not, unless you have a faction that really rewards you for being a warrior, it's not that big of a deal.
I guess my main point is that I'm not convinced, and I think you are, I'm not convinced that those actions decide the winner or the loser of the game. I'm not totally convinced they do. I think in a game with 1 to 300 points, I don't know if that... I think if you've allowed that action to make, and by the way, that happened to you last night, and you won by probably 120 points. So I don't necessarily think that it really matters all that much. Is it now? Do you have to make a little bit more than you did potentially to win? Maybe, but I don't think that is the reason you lost or won.
No, but it's the sum total of these design decisions, I would say, and there's a lot of them.
Well, but really, but then all that matters though is, are those levels of randomness affecting the winner or the loser? That's really all that matters.
And it absolutely does. There's a Tapestry card that you played yesterday. And
okay, yeah. Well, so I pulled out a handful of the Tapestry cards that, to me, I have red flags on. I'm not saying they're bad, but I'm saying I don't necessarily understand how they're balanced. Let's go over a few of them. First one is Dystopia. Gain any landmark from the landmark board and place it in your capital city. Now, I'm racing up a track, and somebody plays that, and one of the big reasons I moved up that track is to try to get the giant thing, and now they just took it. That is a bad feeling.
Yep.
That's a bad feeling. I could imagine for players like Trey, that's I never want to play this again kind of feeling, and for people who really want a strategic balanced decision, that just makes them go, well, who cares? This is I think Trey called it a chaos bomb.
And by the way, this Tapestry card is something I drew. I did not draft it. I did not have to move. I did not have to sacrifice anything else to grab it out of a choice bin. I simply just drew it, and I have this Tapestry card that is 40% better than all the others.
I believe Jamie has said as the question of why don't we see it before we pick our civilizations, and I think he said, well, that was something that was brought up in playtesting, and instead I decided to add in 3 times as many ways to get Tapestry cards throughout the game. So if you don't like the Tapestry card you have, it's the second space on every track is a Tapestry card. So you could, in your first turn, see 5 before you play one if you wanted to. Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of say this is the development card Catan thing happening.
Right, so the cards can be certain random. Right, so let's talk about another one. So
what happened to you, Alfred?
I will say, so I played a 5-player game. I played a 2-player game with Paul, and we'll talk about player counts and how I feel about how it works at different player counts, because I've played all but 3 at this point. I was playing a 2-player game with Paul, and
I'm sorry.
I was doing well, and I did not have an action to get another Tapestry card, and I had 1 Tapestry card in my hand. And my main strategy was moving up the science track. Mm-hmm. And I got Theocracy, which says you cannot advance on the science track. Whenever you enter a new advancement tier, gain 4 points. And I lost the game because now I should have really realized I had a whole round where this was in my hand, and I did not take steps to take a new one.
Right.
But I would have had to take actions to get a new one as opposed to doing what I wanted to do. And I had no choice but to play this.
Sure.
And now I could not get to the end of, I was literally 2 spaces away from the end. And that was my whole game, was getting there. And I was screwed because of that card. Now, I should have done what was necessary to get another Tapestry card, but then I'm doing that as opposed to if I'd drawn something else, I wouldn't have had to done that.
Right.
So that's frustrating. There is Age of Discovery. Now, this has been played twice in games that I've played, and every time it is a bad experience for the other players. So roll the science die. All players must advance on the resulting track. Only you gain the benefit. So let's say, this to me is probably the most egregious in the whole deck.
I agree. This one is the one where Trey definitely does not want to play this game again.
Because of this card.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I hope I'm not speaking for you, Trey. If you're moving up a track, and your next space is your whole strategy, the one that gives you 15 points for whatever, or gets you what you need. This
gets you the territory tile that you need to be able to do all of the next 3 actions after that.
This forces you onto that space, and you don't get the action.
Yep.
That's tough.
Chaos.
I think we can stop there. I think we get the idea. But yeah. This is unfortunately, I think in a game that offers so many possibilities, I feel like it sabotages itself with a lot of the things that were left in the game and a lot of the imbalances that were allowed to exist. And Jamie has an idea that this will counteract that will counteract that. I can tell you from my play experience, it doesn't. It didn't in Viticulture, and it doesn't in this.
Now, I knew exactly what this was when I read the rule book, and I said, Trey's not going to like this game. Tom's not going to like this game. Paul will enjoy this game. Jesse, I said, I went through the list. I said, everybody, Jake will love this game. Jesse will not really like it. Alfred will. I knew Alfred would enjoy this game. I knew what this game was.
Sure.
I knew this was a chaotic game of lemons out of lemonade. And I knew that I would enjoy that experience. I actually don't think I'd enjoy to play this with you and Trey. I think that you're not the right players for this. I think
definitely possible. Yeah.
I think me and Jake and Ben and Paul would have a really fun game of this.
Great.
I think this is a game I would enjoy playing with people who don't necessarily play heavy games, because I can just play my best game and they can just play their best game, and we can enjoy the game and each other's company. I would be very excited for someone smarter than me to figure out the competitive version of this game. And I don't think it's hard. I think it's removing a handful of civs, a handful of techs, and a handful of Tapestry cards. And I think there is a balanced, fun version of this game. I also think I think that's a worthwhile game. I think that's an interesting, fun game in 2 hours.
Then I'll say the last 2 things, which I think may counter that. One is there is a decided lack of tension in the game. There are 61 spaces on the board. Each player can, if you have a normal power, if you don't have one of these weird game-breaking powers, you can place a maximum of 9. You can claim 9 territories on the board. Mm-hmm. That means in a 4-player game, 36 out of 61 tiles are going to be claimed. That is a huge amount of open space in the game. Even in a 5-player game.
I could say the same thing about an 18xx board. There's probably 200 spaces, and you only fill 40 of them in an 18xx train lane. Like, I don't understand how that's a metric.
What? Because you, in the games that we've played so far, you have to go out of your way to get into conflict with people. It's not a board in which people are butting up against each other.
Why is that a positive or a negative? What's the point of that?
Tension. Tension in most games is considered part of the design. It's one of the key ways that we create conflict and tension and all of that. Almost every game is about a competition for resources, a competition for this.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I feel there's definitely a huge amount of tension in fighting for the landmarks. I feel there's absolutely a tension in the. I'm definitely building outwards because I'm worried about giving other people easy topples. I'm worried about racing to the center. To me, there's plenty of tension in those areas. I feel tension throughout the whole game.
I do not believe so.
Okay.
But anyway, and then the last is cost. This is a $100 game.
Mm-hmm.
It does not. To me, the huge miniatures that go there, what do? They don't move on the board. Mm-hmm. They don't do anything except take up space on your little player mat.
Yep.
Some of them are 5 times the size of the other huts and pieces that you have
Yep.
in the game, and they do not look the same. They do not they feel like they were taken from another game and put in here.
Well, he
And
clearly
they're-
saw something online from an artist that he loved and really wanted that in a game.
and
And he
listen,
designed around that.
I respect that. I respect that. But I have to think that that is part of the reason that the cost is so high. And for pieces that don't have any function except their looks, and when their looks themselves do not really, for me, and
You don't
there's
like the way it looks. You didn't like the way it looked from the beginning, though.
it's a personal flavor thing. Listen, I'm fine with the way it looks if it fit in with the rest of the game, but the rest of the artwork doesn't match this. This artwork is almost kind of a claymation style thing.
It's an unusual look for a board game. I kind of like that it doesn't look like anything else. But
If the rest of the game mirrored that, if the rest of the game
it
had
fits in
that
enough
sort
for
of look, then I would say that. But $100 for what this game is giving you just feels egregious. Like, listen, I'll pay $100 for a game, but I'm expecting something epic, and this is not. This is not. You may like this game, and other people, and a lot of people will, but why $100? Why does this make sense to cost twice as much as most other medium weight chaotic fun games?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Now, I don't necessarily know if it's an interesting thing. The amount of times I played this game, by now I'd usually have a pretty concrete feeling on how I feel about it.
Sure.
I don't really with this. I feel like I've only begun to scratch the surface on it, and I think there's a lot of games left in it for me in terms of being able to figure out how I really feel about it. I'm not as convinced as you in the swinginess of the luck. Like I said, I've red flagged a bunch of things that I don't fully understand. And my instinct is that this is probably a optimization puzzle of solitaire that you play with your friends. And that to me is not, that's a, I don't need to play it again. To me, that I actually enjoy that experience. So
Well, for me, I'd play Roads and Boats.
Okay, sure. Sure. So to me, there's still a lot to explore for me. I definitely am interested in people smarter than me trying to figure out if that's true, if this is imbalanced, and if so, I'm not at all convinced that there isn't a competitive balanced game in there somewhere that's going to need a little bit of tweaking under the hood. I don't think it would be hard.
Do you think it's an expansion kind of situation where an expansion might solve both?
I'm extremely interested in expansion. I would be interested in the buildings having asymmetrical powers. I'd be interested in a more competitive version if that's something that people deem necessary. But I'm also I think now, and I'm speaking for the designer of this game, which I can only do based on the games that they have made and produced. I think Stonemaier Games is there to make my first grown-up game. And I think Scythe is my first big Euro. And I think Tapestry is my second big Euro. And I think Wingspan is my game that I'll play with people who don't play games.
Yeah, my gateway.
My gateway. I think Viticulture was, his my first heavy game. I think that, and I think he is a gateway company. And I think that's what they've always been, And I think I think they are the games that, like, almost how like Harry Potter makes children feel like they can read big adult books, And it's like, oh, I've read all the Harry Potter books. Now I can read, Tolstoy. Now I've read a big book that feels like a big heavy book. I think he removes that fear that, like, oh, this big, heavy, complicated thing, I'll never get anyone to play it. I'll never learn it. It's so complicated. I think if you play Scythe, if you play Tapestry, I think in your brain, you feel like I can play real games. I can play big games. And I think it removes that level of fear from the hobby. And I think it's opened up a lot of people to playing games they wouldn't normally play.
I think that $100 for my first Euro game is too much. And to say that can this game be made better with expansions becomes a much harder argument when the initial price is $100. That hurts me.
Where people get, I just spend $100 on Roads and Boats. It's what people's entertainment dollars are worth different things to different people. If this is a game that you can play with your group of friends that don't like any of your other games, it's worth $100 to you.
But whereas Tapestry might be my first Euro, Roads and Boats is my last Euro.
Yeah, exactly. So before we end, let me just briefly talk about player count. I played it at 5. I did not enjoy it at 5 as much as any of the other player counts. It felt too long between. This is a snappy game. I want my turns to be quick.
We played it slightly incorrectly, though, when we went long with that.
We played it slightly incorrectly, and it was a learning game. I wouldn't not play a 5-player game again, but if we had 5, it's probably not the first thing I'm pulling out.
Strangely enough, I will say that my issues with tension and with there being too much empty space on the map was slightly relieved when we were playing it at 5 players.
Sure.
So
I'm
I
open to
actually
that.
thought that was interesting.
I liked it a lot at 4. I really liked it at 2. I think this game might be best at 2. I really enjoyed it at 2. I think the 2-player map is tight and fun. I think it's a quick game. You bang it out in 45 minutes to an hour, which I think is probably the right amount of time for this level of strategy in a game. I also think it's really fun at 1 player. So Jamie always has these wonderful solo components. They have a company called Atoma who makes these lovely rules. I think the solo version for this game is really fun. You play with 1 solo competitor and a shadow empire. So it feels like you're playing a 3-player game, because you have 3 different colors on the track that you're competing with. And when you play a 2-player game, you also play with the Shadow Empire. So there's a 3rd player who has a 10-second AI turn. All you do is flip a card over. It tells you what track they move up on. So there's and they have a favorite track. So 50% of the cards, the Shadow Empire, is always moving up on their favorite track. So you kind of can usually guess what they're moving up on. So the 2-player game is really fun because it feels like a 3-player game. Yeah. And the 1-player game is a 3-player game. I think...
And listen, a lot of my criticisms are for a particular game, and if you're saying that a 2-player version, 1-player version, you can knock out in a half an hour, a lot of my criticisms kind of go away, because then we're talking about a very different game with very different expectations.
Well, and to me, I think of this game in a lot of ways as a solo game. I think if you're looking for a good solo game, I think you should look into this. I think the amount of... I look at this as a video game with like a fighter game. Like if I'm going to play Street Fighter, it's got, there's 16 characters to learn. Oh, that's a lot of replay for me. Like I really like... For me, I like learning their characters, how they play, their different set moves. Oh, there's 8 different boards to play on. Oh, and each one is different. Oh, so to me, that amount of replayability, there's a deck of 50 Tapestry cards. I only play 3 every game. There are 16 civilizations. I want to see all these combinations. I want to see how best I can do it. It removes the imbalance idea of it, because all you're trying to do is just see how well you can do with what you've been given. I don't necessarily think that this is a bad purchase for $100 as a solo game. I think you will get your money's worth. I think there is a ton of replayability in this game. So I think if you're into that, to me, this is a optimization puzzle. And to see how well I can do with the crap I've been handed this game, I think it's worth looking into that. If that is something that appeals to you, which it does to me. I also love Barrage. I also love very heavy games, but they're very different experiences. I feel like I'm getting pretty good at being like, that's the experience this game gives me. Do I like that? Yes. Do I not? No. And sort of deciding how it fits for me. So hopefully this review has given you an idea of what the game is, how it feels like, and if your group or you will enjoy it.
Yeah, and I would say that if you're on the fence in between 2 very strong opinions that are sort of on other sides of the coin here, if you can join a game group where somebody has a copy of it and play it, I think it's a really great opportunity to play before you buy.
What's funny is I don't feel like I have a strong opinion on it yet. I honestly, it's a weird thing. I feel like I need there's too much to explore. I need to play it some more. I don't have a strong feeling on it yet. My strongest feeling I have is I'm excited to keep playing it.
There are listen.
So I kind of have to come back with a review here, because I'm actually not really saying if I love it or not. I'm enjoying it, and I'm very intrigued by it.
There are 25,000 copies that are flooding out there right now. My strongest recommendation, even though I gave a negative review to this, is to go out and play it for yourself, because I do think that there are many different people who have different playing styles that this might be your tuning fork. This might be perfect for you.
Alfred, any final thoughts?
Yep, this is unique enough that I think you'll see it at your local FLGS, as well as if you have a game cafe near you.
Yeah, I mean, not in Boston, but everywhere else they'll be playing.
A big shout out to Night Moves, which is the local game cafe out there, which I plan to be haunting quite a bit. I think this is going to be one of those games, because of the 25,000 copies, that you'll see at those kind of spaces, and it'll jump out at you. And if you like the look of the pieces, there's a lot to say that there's like a kind of built-in advertisement. Just get deep into the space.
As the game enthusiast of the group, I just love that we had no problem talking for 1 hour about this game, which obviously makes it quite interesting, and at least enough to talk about for an hour. And I'm just glad we're in a point in this game, in this industry, in this hobby, where there's enough amazing games coming out that there's so much to talk about.
Yeah, and say what you want about Jamie Stegmaier. He creates games that require a lot of discussion and a lot of analysis. That's for sure.
And he's a superstar. He's a rock star of this industry.
Yeah,
there is I don't think there needs to be any debate around this. Jamie Stegmaier is a very good thing for our hobby.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah,
very
and
much
his
so.
company is a wonderful addition, and the fact that the game of last year was a female designer from his company, I feel like he's doing wonderful things, and he's a boon for us, and I only hope he continues to make great games that we can spend hours talking about.
Here, here.